All right, great. Thank you everyone for coming here today. Very chilly Friday afternoon, and we're actually pleasantly surprised with the turnout because rainy and all that. Even myself, I don't feel like coming, let alone you guys. So very happy that to see so many faces here to, of course, hear not myself, but David to share more with us about this compass framework. So maybe David, we for a start, help us to understand more about this compass framework and also some backstory about it. How did it come about, and what was the precursor to it, and why the introduction of this framework?
Yeah. I think, I mean, first of all, thank you for the invite. It's great to be, out doing these things in person again, post COVID. It's great to see all of you in person, and thank you very much for coming in the rain. Um, Compass, yeah, I think, look, this has not come out of the blue. This is not a completely new thing. It may look like a new thing, but I think it's been part really of a long running public conversation in Singapore about getting that balance between, wanting to attract foreign talent, but also protecting local Singapore jobs at the same time. And it's a difficult balance to get right, Um, I think Singapore as a country, as a nation, has always had diversity, in its DNA. It's a very racially diverse place. Trying to get all of the groups to work together in a harmonious way is a challenge. So you've got that going on. I think, secondly, the tension between, getting that balance right has been exacerbated by COVID, in a lot of ways. You've had, you know, unemployment levels rising, job insecurity being quite low, companies cutting back on costs, looking to rely more on manpower to all their needs. So all of that was going on through COVID. On the back of that, the government made, tightening up some of the restrictions around getting a work balance scale in a few different areas. So we saw the salary thresholds to get an EP and an S pass, they went up. We saw the job advertising requirement go up from 14 days to 28 days. So a lot of changes on the back of that, all sending the message that it was more difficult to get a work balance. I think now we're kind of coming through the other side of COVID, touch wood, knock on wood. I never like to say that. Now we're getting through the other side. Singapore is very much wanting to position itself as a place to attract the best people. Understandably, it wants to be seen as, a regional hub for investment in Asia. And, you've got a lot of people who want to come to Singapore and live and work here. Singapore's looking at the situation in Hong Kong and the wider China region and benefiting from that. And I can speak to that from personal experience, having been in Hong Kong for 8 years. So I got to Hong Kong in 2013, was there as an employment lawyer for 8 years. And the Hong Kong that I arrived in 2013 is very different to the one that I left in 2021. So a lot has changed in that part of the world. You've got a lot of companies wanting to set up shop, wanting to invest in Singapore and trying to bring the best people, along with them. So on the back of that, the government's made some moves to make things a bit easier to bring in people. So the job advertising has gone back from 28 days back down to 14 days. Processing time for EP applications is now 10 working days, much quicker. So you've got all of that. The government's trying to find this balance, and the compass sort of sits in the middle, right? It's trying to bring all of these strands together and say, okay, where do we want to be Singapore in the future? We need to have a framework to get this right, and try to set out, what that looks like.
So fundamentally, help us to understand what would be some additional measures, steps, criteria changes when we look at compass coming into the picture.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe before we get to the how, I want to get to the how, and maybe we can talk about the why. I think is also kind of interesting as well, because, when you look at the name, right, compass is a much better name than the real name. The real name is the complementarity framework assessment, right? Which doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. Compass is a much better name, but I think, complementarity, it's quite interesting to think about that, right? Because it tells you a lot, complementing what? What is it complementary to? Who is it complementary to? And That has been a message that not only encompassed, but in other government guidelines, the discrimination guide. And I'm sure from your perspective as HR is the MOM wants to have some transparency, around this stuff. Kind of say, look, this is what we care about. These are the boxes that you need to tick. Um, in the past, I think it was more of a kind of almost like a black box situation, right? Fill in the application, send it to the MOM. It may be accepted, it may be rejected. You may know why, you may not know why. The appeal process is difficult. I think, from my perspective, it's going to be helpful in the sense that it's going to pull together all of that and say, look, in black and white, these are the things that we care about. These are the things that you need to do. So I think if there's one sort of takeaway from this as well, I would say, there's going to be a lot of change. The rules are more complicated, but it should, in the long run, I think, make it, more clear and transparent.
Okay. So in terms of this transparency, of course, is something that I believe all HR, as well as our audience here, would really much appreciate. But when it comes to fulfillment of this transparency, what are some of the, I may be jumping the gun here, but I would imagine for many of us who are doing all this, the last thing we want to do is extra work, more work. Okay, I take it from all the the laughter that is true.
More is true, by the way.
Yeah. Same for everyone. So what are some of the things that we should expect from this? Are there more paperwork? What is kind of fulfillment that we need to look at? Because end of the day, we just want to get through our day.
Right.
Yeah. So how do we make it easier for everyone? And what are some of the stuff that companies and HR should look out for?
Yeah. I mean, the way I kind of look at it is it's almost like the hurdles, the hurdles in the Olympics, the race, it's like 200 meters, you jump over the fence and try and jump over another fence. There's kind of three ways that you can jump over a fence. You can jump all the way over the fence and pass the fence. You can jump over and you might leave your leg hanging behind and you hit the fence, but you still keep pushing on. You get to the next hurdle. You can continue the race. There'll be other, people ahead of you in the race, or you can completely hit the hurdle and fall flat on your face, disqualified from the race. Which may be myself because I was not a big athletics fan at school. I'm more of a football guy. But that's kind of the way this is going to work in the sense that there will be a number of hurdles that you'll have to pass. There's going to be a mix of foundational hurdles. There'll be 4 foundational hurdles and an additional 2 bonus hurdles. And at the end of the day, it's a new points-based integration system. So it's similar to exist in Australia at the moment. You need to score highly enough on different criteria. You have to get a total of 40 points, 40. And as long as you can do that, you will pass the compass test. So I think it's, about understanding what each of those hurdles is, how you can successfully navigate the track and get over the stage without too much damage.
And according to the notes I have here, the foundational criteria will be salary, qualifications, diversity, and support for local employment. Following which there's also the bonus criteria, which is on skill bonus, as well as strategic economic priority bonus. Now, the first 4, very straightforward. I think we can easily understand what those are. Perhaps you can help us to better understand what is this bonus criteria? What exactly does skill bonus and strategic economic priority bonus, quite a mouthful, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, there's a lot of mouthfuls in the compass framework. The skills bonus, look, there's 2 components to the skills bonus. One is the skills shortage list. So basically, if you are in a highly demanded role or you have highly specialized skills, you'll get the bonus potentially. We don't know exactly what roles, that will involve. The MOM has said it's going to produce a list of those roles, and we're expecting that to come out next year. But I think the focus is going to be on tech and digitalization roles, which is something that the government in Singapore has been pushing a lot. So it's kind of wait to see on the skills one. The strategic economic priorities is even more difficult. I think it's pretty niche. It's companies who have signed up to kind of international agreements at a government level, local economic development projects. Again, we're still going to wait to see what exactly projects you have to be part of, tick the box. But I think those are going to be, you don't want to be relying too much on the bonus criteria.
Because ultimately they're just bonus.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you really want to make sure that you're confident on the 4 foundational criteria to get there.
Okay. And would there be any instance where any application might be exempted from Compass?
Yes. So there are going to be exemptions, which will broadly be the same as the exemptions which apply under the job advertising requirement. So at the moment, you don't have to advertise the role if salary level is above 20,000 Singapore dollars a month. If the applicant comes in as an ICT under the EP stream, there's a few things where you can be exempt. And what Compass does is kind of take those exemptions and apply it also to Compass. However, there are a couple of differences. One is going to be the exemption for small businesses won't apply in Compass. So under the job advertising, if you have less than 10 employees, if you're a small business, you only have less than 10 employees, don't need to go through job advertising. That doesn't apply in Compass. So even if you're a small business, you still need to go through Compass. So that's one thing to think about. But broadly speaking, there will be exemptions which match. Yes, yeah.
Okay, got it. And when you look at Compass in general, and of course, I believe you would have a reference point from other countries on how they perhaps have introduced something similar, perhaps even years and decades ago. How do you see this thing developing in the future? How do you see the evolution of this Compass framework?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, it's funny you said the foundational criteria are simple, right? But I think I've been getting a lot of questions from clients around particularly the diversity side of things and also the support for the local employment side. And I think that's going to be the thing that people are going to have to get their head around. How are we going to deal with this? How is the MOM going to look at this? So on the diversity side of things, what the MOM is going to look at is my nationality, and it's going to look at all of the employees in the company and say, percentage wise, how diverse am I amongst my employee population? So if I am Chinese and all of my employees, management level employees are also Chinese, I'm going to score quite low on the diversity test. If I'm Indian, for example, and all of the employees are mostly Chinese, I'll score very highly on the diversity test. So that's broadly the way it's going to work. But I have had a few clients asking me, what does nationality mean in this context, right? Is it because I could be born somewhere, have a passport somewhere else, multiple passports? What does that actually mean? MOM has said that it's based on the passport. So if someone is, for example, ethnically Chinese but born in Australia, they have a passport in Australia, they will be Australian for the purposes of this diversity assessment. So that's something which has come from other systems as well, and which has not been clear up until this point. I think that's one thing to bear in mind. On the support for local employment, which I did want to come back to, because this is the one I think that I do get asked most about. Clients come to me and say, look, David, like we're making an EP application. What is the ratio? What is the quota that I need to have of foreigners to expats? They always ask that. And I always have to say, there's no official quota, right? For EP applications, only in SPAS applications is a quota, and that's not very helpful to them. They're like, well, how are you going to help me now? So, look, what they're doing now with Compass is the MOM is going to look at this in some more detail, and they're going to take more of what I would call, a scientific approach to this. So they're going to look at other companies in your sector. You drop a list, you'll be in a league table, companies within your sector, say tech, you look at all the companies in the tech sector. Look at how many local employees you have, how many expats you have, which the MOM has that data on, and you'll be put in the legal tables. And if you fall in the bottom half of the table, you're going to score more low. The bottom half to middle, you still pass, but it's only a 10, not a 20. And if you're in the top half, you will get the full points on that score. However, there is one line in the Compass framework which says, if you have a ratio of 70 to 30, you will pass by default that criteria, right? So a lot of clients have come to me and said, well, is the ratio now 70-30, right? That seems to be the case. This is under the new compass. It's not saying that. It's not saying you must have a ratio of 70-30, right? But it's saying if you do have 70-30, you will pass compass.
Right.
It's a slight difference. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think, going forward, a lot of companies are going to look at that and say, we need to work towards a 70-30, right? Because if you've got 70-30, you pass on that hurdle, top the hurdle. And that's 10 points, possibly 20 points. And you're already halfway there to passing the test.
So 70-30 should be something all companies should try to aim for. But of course, if it's not practical, it just doesn't work in all reality, then you have to look at what is happening in your market, in your sector, which of course I would imagine is quite a moving target. And trying to get visibility even on dated information might be quite challenging because it probably will be done through sampling size. Where do we even get the updated data to begin?
Yeah. And that's another question that, a lot of clients ask as well is we want to be, benchmarking ourselves against other people in the market. How do we go about doing that? I think step one is you should really be collecting information about your own demographics. That expression, know thyself. You have to know yourself before you know other people, right? And we've got some clients who collect data, some clients who don't. Obviously, you need to make sure that it's being collected in a way that's in accordance with data privacy laws, but that's really going to help you kind of understand your workforce, your profile. So you need to know yourself, step one, I think. Two, looking out to other companies in your sector, you need to know what your sector is, right? And that may be easy for most of you. You may know which sector you're in. May not be so easy for others. If you're in multiple sectors, like which one am I in? Am I a tech company? Am I an F&B company or retail? So on that, the MOM has said what you should go by is on the company's registry website, on the ACRA page, whatever sector you register on that basis, that's what they will use to assess which sector you're in.
Okay.
So I think after this, if you don't know which sector you're in, go on company's website, download a file, you can see, which sector you're in.
And possibly consider changing sector as well.
Possibly, yeah.
Whatever makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And going to the other points as well, since we also have salary. Now, salary obviously is quite straightforward. Qualification, for those of you who may not be aware, obviously point system, 0 points for no degree equivalent qualification, 10 points for degree equivalent qualification. And then there's one more tier, which is 20 points if you come from a top tier institute, top 100 universities based on international ranking, Singapore's autonomous university, and highly recognized vocational institutions. So again, I guess we are in a way taking a step back to focusing very much on academic performances and paper qualification as a gauge on the kind of people we're bringing in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange one because MLM has said that under Compass, it's not a requirement, actually. It's not a strict requirement that you have to have the right qualifications to pass. That is correct. But if you fail on the qualifications, if you get 0 points or 10 points, you don't come from a top tier institution, it is going to impact you, right? Because it's going to bring you down when you try to get through on the other points. So I think it's not a failure if you don't have the top academics, but it's certainly going to be a factor that's taken into account. I mean, under the existing system as well, I think that's the case, right? You do need to have some level of qualifications to get through an ET application. And they're going to continue that under Compass.
And I will also imagine additional administrative hurdle or burden just to validate the authenticity of this qualification as well. We have seen so many cases locally of people faking their degrees. There's plenty of degree mills out there. And I could easily right now on my phone buy a degree from MIT if I want to. So how would that impact the kind of additional scope for HR? Because do I have to validate every single application? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question because in the news this week, I don't know if you saw, there's been some concerns raised about the one pass. So the one pass is a whole different, we could talk about the one pass all day. But there have been concerns that, people are going to be applying for this thing who are not really, getting the right salary, or they're not in the right roles, because you have to be, top talent, whatever top talent means. So there is a concern that people are going to be abusing the system, right? I mean, look, I think there's always going to be some level of abuse with any system, right? There's going to be a level of abuse at the moment. Um, we work with a lot of clients on background checks. I've done many cases where we've had to terminate employment because someone has provided a false documentation. As HR, as a business, you can only do what's reasonable, right? Um, I don't think you're going to have to, go out to a background check company and get them to verify all the information. Um, MOM can always ask if they have any suspicions about what's being presented to them. They can always ask questions. They can always request for the documentation. So I think as HR, as long as you have requested the right documents, you've provided it as part of the application, and that should be enough. But I think it's something to watch out for. It's going to be something that people try and take advantage of.
And I would imagine a key concern from HR is they've done whatever they think is possible, and somehow things happen. The degree is fake, and things just got out of hand. You have to terminate employment, all that. You have to explain to MOM. Would that somehow lead to some form of penalty, red flag, or company placed under the radar, which affect future application under this Compass framework?
I mean, it depends, right? Look, I think in most cases, if it's a very obvious fake document, right, MWeb is not going to be happy. But this is my degree certificate. So I think if you've done some basic level of due diligence, right, make sure it's proper university, make sure the name is correct, make sure the name is spelled correctly, all of these kind of basic things. That's what the MON is going to be concerned about.
I read a recent news article about this guy who faked a Temasek Poly diploma and managed to catch it because the lady who was processing, or HR was processing it, realized that the font type is different.
Yes.
Yeah, this HR person actually is a keen collector or observer of Temasek Poly diploma. To be able to pick up nuances like that and to realize different font type is a fake.
Yeah.
So, but I dare argue most of us will not be able to pick up such subtle details. So I would imagine at the very least, perhaps trying to put some effort in trying to validate the authenticity. You see, if we have cases where people are daringly faking Temasek Poly diploma, what say of you for any other schools that you may not have heard of? Even the famous one, MIT, you can easily fake it if you want. IIT, it's all possible.
And be careful, you're being recorded with Adrian.
So back to this discussion. What you mentioned quite a number of things that your clients might be have asked you, they're concerned about. Are there any other aspects that they have raised to you that you think would be a legitimate concern that our audience here might want to pay attention to?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main theme that I've been getting from clients is change, right? There's going to be a lot of change, and people don't like change, except lawyers, maybe strangely, because we get to talk about it
and make money from it.
Most people don't like change. And look, I mean, in some ways, you could look at this and say, as I've mentioned, this is not a completely new thing. It's not going to change the way that we hire people fundamentally, I think. But there's going to be a procedural change, and we have to get familiar with the procedure. That's going to require a lot of education, both internally within HR and people who handle your EP applications, but also to management and on the business side, right? Because by the time, someone needs to apply for an EP, the decision to hire has already been made. It's like, the management don't know that they don't add to the diversity profile of the company, or we're going to fail on the support for local employment. And that's going to really impact, if we fail on the EP, could have an impact on future applications, right? So I think it's raising awareness both internally within HR, but also to management, and letting them know that this is a change that's coming in. It's something that we need to take seriously in Singapore, and it should be at the front end of any hiring decisions. So that's one thing. I think, we've talked about the 70-30 rule. I think that's something there's going to need to be some kind of awareness of as well, and kind of understanding that. Um, we've talked about the abuse part as well. I think that is something that clients are going to be concerned about. Um, I think, going forwards, one of the things that we, might see um, is the benchmarking that we talked about. More people coming to Singapore, frankly, is
Mm.
the other thing, right? Singapore is still attracting a lot of people. It's multinational, and I think we're only going to see an increase in those numbers. It's not only going to apply to new applications, but also to renewals as well. I think that's
Oh,
one point to really,
okay.
really bear in mind, right? So Compass will be in effect for new applications from September next year, 2023, but for renewal applications for the following year, 2024.
Mm.
So I think not a lot of people are aware of that at the moment. Actually, they think it's just going to be for new applications. But if you have people on EPs at the moment and they're going to renew after 2024, they will need to pass Compass to
Right.
get through. Okay. So I think, doing an audit now to find out who is on an AP, when is their expiry date, when do we need to renew? Is it going to be before or after Compass?
Mm.
Which stream are they going to go through on?
Mm.
That's key. And it sounds like a long time, right? September next year, which it sort of is, but it's October now. I'm thinking about Christmas already. I'm sure, next September is going to come around very quickly.
That's a very good point about the renewal part because, again, even for me, I wasn't aware that it's going to be applicable for those. And doing the audit definitely is a smart move. But depending on the size of your organization, that can be a lot of burden, a lot of time being spent. And you probably also need to give your people the opportunity to come clean, just in case some of them might have misrepresented, for lack of another word, is in their initial application, so that you can try to see how to make good if that is something that you want to pursue. And I think that the going back to what I asked earlier on, so based on what you can foresee, how do you think this thing may further evolve moving from here? And are there things that perhaps companies can really even start putting in place to try to be more prepared when Compass 2.0, 3.0 may come about, whatever or however it might be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, difficult to see too far in the future, but I think we're still waiting for some of the details to come out. I think the skills shortage list, once we get that, that's going to be important to look through that and find out which roles are going to be on that list. That's one thing. There is a self-assessment tool which you can use at the moment for EP applications. I believe that the MOM is going to be upgrading that tool. So you can use that to get an indicative score based on you plug in the information. What's my likely score on Compass? So that once they've done that, that will be a helpful development as well. And I mean, look, going forward, in terms of like hiring practices, right? Is it going to change the way that we hire people? That's kind of the bigger question, right? And on that, I mean, we've got at least one data point, which is at DLA, we actually ran a client survey back in August, I think it was. And we went out to clients and we said, we asked them a bunch of questions about Compass. Do you know what Compass is? Do you think it's more complex, less complex? But one of the questions we asked was, is it going to change the way that you hire foreign people, going forwards? And surprisingly, the answer was no. Most people said no. Said, I think 70% plus said, no, it's not going to fundamentally change the way that you hire people. So, that's positive news, I think. It means that people still feel comfortable enough that they're not going to be scared off on making applications because of this. So that's helpful. The other side of it, though, however, was I think at least 40%, maybe 45% said that they planned to reduce the existing foreign talent pool within the organization, either through retrenchments or, which is surprising. So I think there is some conversation internally about, for our existing population, how do we fix that, for the 70-30 or whatever it is? Do we need to make some changes around that? So that was interesting that came out of our side.
Right, right. And before we wrap this up, David, any parting words for our audience here? Any things that you believe you would like to share with them?
I just to say thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you. there is a lot of change happening, and I feel for you in HR. You've had a crazy few years. I was talking to Derek about this, right? I think it's been bittersweet because, it's been tough and stressful, but, certainly my clients and companies really value HR now more than they ever did for sure. Um, I think you're, crisis manager, health and safety expert, psychologist,
BPO,
yeah.
everything. Yeah.
But so Compass is another change. It's complicated, but just stick with it. I think in the long run, it's going to help you and the organization. If you can get ahead now, it will stand you in good stead.
And for people who may want to learn more about yourself or speak with you after this or know what you do, where can they look for you?
Yep. So I'll be hanging around here. If you've got any questions, feel free to let me know. I work at DLA Piper, we're an international law firm, so you can find me at LinkedIn, you can find me on the website. I look after our Singapore employment practice here, but I also help companies throughout the region, so everything through South and Southeast Asia, from India to the Philippines. So feel free to drop me an email, give me a call, or connect with me on LinkedIn.
Great. And so I hope you found this session useful. Obviously, a lot of new changes coming through, and this is just one particular thing. We are not sure what other new stuff MOM may have under their sleeve. We can only anticipate, but we can just try to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And I guess on the other hand, it's really to look at how we can take a different approach in talent acquisition. I had a chat with someone from MOM, and he did mention something to me is if every company just look at acquiring and skip building, the maths just doesn't add up because you just don't have enough supply of talent.
Right.
And right now in a situation where our total fertility rate remain to be so low, we are almost number one compared to Japan. And also we are fighting against so many bigger boys out there, the likes of Google, Accenture, they just snap their finger, all the upper class honors people will just go to them. So it makes it very challenging for us. So I think building your local pool of talent, looking at alternate source of talent might be quite interesting to look at. And the good thing is, I guess over the past 2 years, COVID has taught us your talent may not necessarily be someone in Singapore. If everyone is looking to hire globally, so can I. And perhaps that is also another possibility to try to keep that balance and try to maintain that sanity within where we are. So with that, thank you so much